Black Christmas was released in 1974 and was directed by Bob Clark, who you may also know directed Porky's, as well as A Christmas Story, which everyone knows A Christmas Story. But this movie stars Margot Kidder and is about sorority sisters who are stalked and slowly picked off by a psycho murderer. So I'm just gonna get out of the way and say I think this is the greatest Christmas horror movie to ever come out. This movie is so fantastic. I love it. It's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. I was thinking about keeping it as like the last Christmas review, but I just couldn't help myself. I love this movie. I think it is so great. And before people are being like, oh, this is a terrible movie, that's the one that just recently released. This movie has been remade so many times. I think there was a remake in 2006. Yeah, I think 2006. And that one's called like Black Christmas, but they put an X instead of like Chris. And then they came out with one that's like super feminism 2019 Black Christmas, which really bad movie. Not the feminism part. Support that, but terrible movie. They portray it in a bad light. Could get into that at a different time, but I want to talk about this movie because it is so freaking great. We have characters who are strong. We understand decisions that they make. Although we may not agree with some of the decisions that they'll always make in this movie, we do understand why they're doing it. Oh, just so many things in this movie. Let's just start talking about some pros. So my first pro that I have with this movie is the Moaner, which is our main killer antagonist in this movie. Whenever he's somehow involved in the movie, I really don't want to spoil anything because such a great movie. But whenever he's involved, whenever he's calling people, his performance is so creepy. We really don't learn much about our killer, and that we don't need to learn much about him. We just know he's a psychopath, and that's all we need to know. He's calling these girls in the sorority house. He's like yelling, he's screaming, moaning, all of this stuff. And like to some, it may be like, oh, that's kind of funny. But it is really creepy when you think about it. Just picturing yourself as like this girl in her sorority house and someone keeps on calling your home phone, just moaning, screaming, yelling about, is Billy there? Stuff like that. It is terrifying, and they do such a great job portraying this creepy character in the Moaner. Just very great antagonist. In terms of other pros, our female-led cast is amazing. The acting is phenomenal. Like I said, decisions are pretty good. Just everything is so good in this movie. I mean, I really struggle to try to find a con that I had with it because there isn't much to dislike. I personally feel like there isn't much to dislike about this movie. I did come up with one, but I'm not done with pros yet. We're going to keep on continuing with some pros. I do want to say, just going back to the 2019 pro-feminism one, there's a bunch of different elements of feminism within this movie that are portrayed fantastically, and I don't want to really spoil any of it, but it's done very, very well in this movie. With the 2019, there's so many issues with that where the message got really bogged down, and that's really what takes down that movie. It's not the fact that the message is bad, it's portrayed in a very bad light, unfortunately. Luckily, in the 1974 version, it is portrayed amazingly. So another pro that I have with this movie is the comedy aspect of it. It is really funny, and not in the fact of it's not trying to be. In scenes where it's trying to be funny, it's actually really hilarious. There's a specific scene there's two scenes in the police station that are hilarious. So there's a lot of good comedy in this movie. And even the characters themselves are very funny. There's a lot of moments like Miss Mac. She is hilarious. I loved her in this movie. Barb, she is very funny. Just overall, very funny. But when it needed to be scary, it got scary. And in terms of cons, the only con that I could even remotely think of, which is the tiniest little smallest nitpick, was that in the middle, it jumps around a lot. And that in itself really isn't a con, but if there were to be one, that would be, because it does jump around a lot to different places, different characters, and it becomes a little bit not confusing, but it becomes a little bit too much. But even so, I really don't think it ever takes down the movie. And that's really the only con that I could think of. Just so many things went right with this movie. And the ending. You just need to watch it. I'm recommending it right now. Watch this movie. Overall, I'm going to give this movie a 9.75 out of 10. And like I've been saying the whole time, I recommend it. It is fantastic. You will not regret watching this movie. So thank you everyone for watching this episode of Tinsel Tuesday. We'll have one more, and then after that, it's basically Christmas time. So be on the lookout for the review that will be coming out next Tuesday. But let's flash forward to the next reveal.